Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 148 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here, you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. A little over 5 years ago now, I released the first episode of Welcome to Geektown. To all of my listeners, whether you've been here from episode 1 or if this is your first, I want to say thank you. Your support means the world to me. In the first anniversary, I covered my favorite character, Speedball, and on subsequent anniversaries, I've been discussing Speedball's teammates on the various incarnations of the New Warriors. And I continue that tradition now, where we reach the 6-issue miniseries, aka New Warriors, Volume 3. Released in 2005, the story was written by Zeb Wells, with art by Scotty Young. Like Volume 2, this team consisted of members from the original run, with a couple of new additions. Justice and Firestar had graduated to the Avengers, and so were not part of this team, but Nova, Night Thrasher, Namorita, and of course Speedball were all members. We'll talk about the 2 added teammates in a little bit, but first let's talk about what makes this iteration of the team so different. Up until this point, Dwayne Taylor, aka Night Thrasher, had been the money behind the team through his company, the Taylor Foundation. However, we learn in issue 3 that the foundation lost much of its money due to a failed investment, and so Dwayne turned to a unique source of funding: television rights. In this miniseries, the New Warriors were being filmed for a reality TV show. The premise of the show was that the team would drive around to smaller towns where there weren't established heroes, and defeat supervillains that had left New York, the hub of superhuman activity in the Marvel Universe, for the suburbs. As you can probably tell from that description, this book was played more for humor than the last 2 iterations had been, all the more emphasized by Scotty Young's distinctive cartoony art. While the team fought the villains they encountered, they also faced internal strife over their new status quo, as Namorita especially didn't like dealing with the cameras and other restrictions placed on them by the producers. In fact, Speedball seemed to be the only one who actually enjoyed the reality show concept, but the rest put up with it, as they felt the good they were doing was worth the cost. Now, I mentioned earlier a failed investment that caused the team to take on this reality show agreement, and that ties into one of the 2 new characters added to the team. In this case, Microbe. Dwayne's foundation, in addition to subsidizing his superheroics, also used its vast wealth to research new medical breakthroughs, and they thought they had found one with microbiologist Zachary Smith, who had discovered a flesh-eating bacteria that would only eat cancer cells. However, when the results couldn't be replicated, it was soon discovered that the only reason this worked is because Zachary's son, Zachary Smith Jr., was a mutant with the power to talk to germs. As his father's lab assistant, he had been subconsciously directing the bacteria to do what his father wanted. This revelation caused the Foundation's stock to tank, leaving the superhero now near broke. Meanwhile, Zachary Smith Sr. retreated from the world, denying to even himself his son's involvement in his original success. When he tried his bacteria on himself, he died. leaving his son an orphan. Dwayne, being an orphan himself, felt bad for the young mutant and adopted him, adding him to the team as Microbe. As mentioned, Microbe's powers involve talking to germs and getting them to do what he wants. This isn't necessarily all that useful in combat, although he could convince germs to make people sick or nauseated to various degrees. In addition, he was able to determine certain human-looking robots were artificial beings due to the lack of germs surrounding them, and he could do other useful tricks like sterilize wounds by keeping bacteria away from those sites, causing metal to rust by encouraging certain microorganisms to feed on the material, and even was able to fix a flat tire by asking germs to digest some of the rubber, creating oxygen, heat, and an adhesive sludge that sealed the leak. Unlike most superpowered beings, Zachary/Microbe is not in physically fit condition. In fact, he's fairly obese, which unfortunately is usually presented as a source of comedy or something to make fun of the character for. But Dwayne, at least, as his adopted father, is always encouraging and trying to improve the young man's self-esteem, rather than put him down like most of the team does. Since New Warriors Volume 3's release, Microbe has been rarely seen, for reasons we'll get into in a little bit. But first, let's touch on the other new character in the book. The producers of the Warriors reality show saw that the team mostly got along with one another and wanted to add some internal conflict to create added drama. If you've watched any reality TV, this is probably not surprising to you. And so, without telling the other members, Deborah Fields was brought in and added to the team. Deborah, going by the codename Debris, is a low-level telekinetic, able to take small loose items and gather them together to create shields and as offensive weapons as well. At one point in the series, she uses her powers to take various broken robot parts and encase herself in a shell of armor. While her abilities are incredibly useful in combat, personality-wise, she is incredibly combative. In her few brief appearances, she never gets along with any of the other team members, being especially outspoken about Microbe's lack of combat-worthiness powers, and also being very dismissive of Namorita. Since Debris shows up in issue 4, and the series only went to issue 6, she doesn't get a lot of panel time, so that's pretty much all we learn about the character in this original story. We'll talk a little about her later appearances, but first we need to discuss what this version of the team led to and the aftermath. If you're not a comic book reader but follow the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then you know something about Civil War, as it was very loosely adapted into the third Captain America movie. However, since there were only a dozen or so active heroes in the MCU at the time, many of the details were changed significantly from the comics, starting with the inciting incident. In the movie, it was a mission in Lagos where Wanda's attempt to save Captain America from a bomb ended up destroying a nearby building and killing multiple civilians in the process. However, in the comics, it involved this team of new warriors, minus Debris, who was not included for some reason, and Nova, who had headed back into space. The team, still wandering the country, being filmed for a reality show, found supervillains Cobalt Man, Speed Freak, Cold Heart, and Nitro holed up in Stamford, Connecticut. At first, things seemed to be going well, but when Namorita takes on Nitro, he explodes, which is his power, although not usually at the level seen in this story, right next to an elementary school in session. The devastation kills every member of the team, except Speedball, along with over 600 innocent bystanders. With the whole thing caught on tape, including Speedball bragging about the ratings they'll get from the fight, it's this event that launches the government's decision to force all superheroes to register and provide their identity in order to legally continue their heroic activities. As in the movie, Iron Man and Captain America end up the leaders of the pro- and anti-registration teams, respectively. Being at the center of this controversial event, the remaining New Warriors and other teenage heroes were mostly reviled by the public at this point. One former member of the team, Hindsight, is so ashamed of his association that he anonymously doxes other surviving members in order to sick the mob on them. Debris is one of the victims of this, and her car is overturned and set on fire. In the aftermath of Civil War, she and some other new warriors and allies of the team joined the 50-State Initiative, a government-run program to train and assign superheroes so that each of the 50 states has its own dedicated super team. Debris ended up not graduating from that program and turned against it, joining a team originally calling itself Counterforce, but later taking on the New Warriors name briefly, trying to redeem the team's reputation, consisting of former warriors Justice and Rage, along with Slapstick, who was never an official member of the team, but joined them for a brief adventure in the pages of Marvel Comics Presents. In the 15 years since Civil War was published, both Night Thrasher and Namorita have been returned from the dead. It's also believed that Microbe has been revived, with the mutants of Krakoa's resurrection protocols. A man with his appearance is seen in the background of Marauders number 3, but there's been no confirmation of this or further appearances of note, so that's only a theory for now. One last note about this version of the team. Night Thrasher, Speedball, Microbe, and Debris were all set to be members of the team in the pilot filmed in 2017 that was originally set to air on Freeform, but was turned down by that network and never found a new home, and so is to this day still unaired. Rounding out that team were Squirrel Girl and Mr. Immortal, who were never warriors in the comics. But the fact that the roster of heroes so closely matched to the Volume 3 team makes me believe that the reality show concept would have been part of the premise of the show. Since the show has still never been released, officially or by leaking it on the internet, this is only my personal theory, but I think some of the promotional images that were created also bear this out. I still would like to see the pilot that was made someday, even though it sounds like the show would have taken the team less seriously than I would prefer. However, since a completely different take on Mr. Immortal has shown up in the She-Hulk TV show on Disney+, the one thing I can take away from this is that those characters are available to show up in future MCU projects, rather than being stuck in the then more sequestered Marvel television show this would have been. As the world's biggest Speedball fan, I'd love to see him in live action eventually, but for now, I'll just wait and see. How about you? Do you have a favorite character you want me to introduce to the other listeners? Or maybe a character you just met that you'd like to find out more about? Or any other topic you'd like to hear me discuss about comics, board games, role-playing, or any other geeky subject? Please send any and all of those via email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome to Geektown, Twitter @GeektownPodcast, or Mastodon @welcome2geektown @mastodon.social. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, why not become a patron at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips of the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.